Earlier today, F1 announced its new sprint format. Now, if you didn't see the announcement, effectively the changes are we'll have practice 1 Grand Prix qualifying on the Friday as unchanged. However, qualifying on the Friday sets the grid for Sunday, not the Saturday sprint now. Yes, in terms of what's being called Sprint Saturday, which I'm sure has already been trademarked, copyrighted, and those rights sold about 785 different ways, just like Barcelona Football Club have. We'll have the Sprint Shootout and the F1 Sprint. Now, Sprint Shootout is basically a shorter version of normal qualifying with mandatory tyres. Q1 being 12 minutes, Q2 10 minutes, and Q3 8 minutes. Now, obviously, having a half an hour qualifying plus a couple of minutes between, so you're probably looking at 40 minutes at least as well. And then gives a problem because obviously there's going to be a gap, probably about 3 hours between the sprint shootout and sprint qualifying and the race, or the sprint rather. This, I think, is an issue because it means that if people got to hang around waiting for the sprint now, that's the problem I've always maintained with Formula E. Trying to cram it in on the same day leaves lots of hanging around. It's something I don't like, which is why I've never actually, other than when I went there and watched a real life race, trackside, I've never actually watched Formula E qualifying in all the years that the series has been on, and only actually ever watched the race. Now, part of that is due to the fact the race not being broadcast in the earlier years on television. Obviously, later years it's all online now. But interestingly, they've introduced the mandatory tyres, mediums for the first 2 sessions and soft for the third session. Kind of mirrors a little trial that they're running at some point later this year. I can't remember, the first one's been announced already for that, and I can't remember when it is. Basically, they were doing the Q1 on the hards, Q2 on the mediums, and Q3 on the softs. Now, obviously, there will be extra tyres. Again, there's obviously that thing because obviously tyres, there's all that environmental impact of tyres. F1 recently has only announced it wants to be more sustainable. Tyres definitely probably need to be looked at some point. As well, but so why don't I like it? Well, for start, apart from the hanging about thing on Saturday, it's something I don't like. I don't think that F1 needs I'll correct myself. F1 needed to separate the sprint to allow Friday qualifying to decide the Sunday order for start for the grid for the main race. I agree that that's the best way to go for that. What they should have done with the sprint, and again, I'm somebody who doesn't like sprints. I think they're a waste of time. I think that they are a major setback and taking viewers away from the main race on the Sunday. I personally think they should just stick with what they got and get rid of FP3 because it's pointless and allows obviously a bit more scheduling openness, because obviously with the scheduling it's super tight when you've got all the support series to fit in as well. I mean, somebody's going to be racing at 6 o'clock in the morning at this rate. But obviously the other thing is it gets rid of FP2, which means obviously we've got the big issue of young drivers. Now, F1 teams have to field young drivers at 2 FP1 sessions per year. It's in the current rules. I think it's 2, and they have to be, well, when I say young drivers, they have to have completed 2 or less Grand Prix effectively to get away with it. Now, in a sprint weekend like this, which F1 I know is going to push to make this the normal format for every weekend, imagine having, well, F1 Liberty Media want 25 race calendars. I don't think they're pushing that much for next year, only 24, but they are pushing to going 25 race calendar. Imagine having 50 races a year. I don't think I can, that is a lot of racing, We don't need to see that racing. I think it personally spoils the race series, and it's going to lead to too many points being on offer for the championship. Now, if F1 decides that it needs to have sprints for monetary reasons, then my preferred, and I say preferred thing, to make it a lot interesting for the smaller teams as well, especially on those on the fringe of the top 10, reverse the top 10 from qualifying. It's a format that's been used in the junior formula with its sprint races. It's a format that's used pretty much everywhere. I think the F1 Academy has announced their weekend format as well, the new F4W series effectively as well. They're having a reverse grid as well as also obviously we've already got F2 and F3 that have reverse grids from qualifying, only one qualifying, but F1 has decided to have two. I should point out that F1 Academy does have two qualifyings, but it has 3 races per weekend. So although one of the qualifyings has a reverse grid for a sort of sprint race in the middle of the 3 races there in that format. But yes, I personally think that reversing the top 10 gives the smaller teams a chance of getting some points, and B, obviously makes it more interesting. It means that if you want to fight for those points, then obviously you've got to make a load of overtaking, increase overtaking, which makes F1 popular. After all, less DRSs perhaps potentially, and maybe they need to try that out as well. Obviously, DRS overtakes aren't as interesting as other overtakes, although some of the DRS overtakes we saw in Australia with that 4th DRS zone that's just been added was actually allowed additional overtakes at corners where we previously haven't actually seen any overtakes at all. But yes, so that's why I don't particularly like F1's new sprint format. The other major thing, of course, is I think there's too many points offered in F1 these days. First of all, apart from the fact you've got extra points for sprint races and whatnot, or sprints, whatever you want to call them, the point system for the main race is flawed, because it's meant for 26 car grids and we only have 20 on the grid. So they should really look at reducing the number of point scorers and reducing the number of points on offer, so that Red Bull can't score 1,000 points a season, because that's going to happen. That's with so many races probably coming up, they're going to be, Red Bull, if they continue their domination into the future, will probably end up with 1,000 points a season, which is ridiculous. There should be less points on offer, and if they want to have more races, that's fine. They just need to take a leaf out of the history book, because in the history book they used to limit the number of results that counted towards your championship total. For example, you'd only, if in a 16 race season, you're only allowed to have your 11 best points finishes would count towards your total. And I think they need to rethink about reintroducing something here now, maybe the best 16 of 24, for example, 25. That way the points are less, and not for maybe the best 2 sprint races, for example, count as well. For they need something separate for sprints. Basically, it limits the amount of points you can score, and it obviously makes. Obviously the maths involved will be a nightmare, which is why they removed it in the first place. But you know, it does make the championships more interesting, makes it closer, and you know, because I don't think, you know, currently with the way the regulation, the way Red Bull are going, we're not going to see a repeat showdown of 2021 anytime soon, unfortunately. As well, regardless of what happened in that race. So yes, that's my rant over about points and sprints. If you have enjoyed, leave a like. Make sure you leave a comment making known your opinions about sprint, whether you like the new sprint format, whether you dislike the sprint, whether you prefer my alternate sprint, whether you preferred the previous version of sprint from last year in 2021, or whether you just prefer to have a normal Grand Prix weekend. In the comments below. If you aren't new around here, please do get subscribed for weekly Formula 1 content. Until the next video then, I'll see you next time. Take care, thanks so much for watching, enjoy your day, and goodbye.